I can't remember exactly what year it happened, but I've never been able to forget the fear I felt that night. It's one of those things you assume only happens to other people, or in bad movies. And that kind of innocence only makes it so much worse when it finally happens to you. I was young back then, still in junior high, right at that age where you start convincing yourself you're not a kid anymore. I thought I was growing up, becoming tougher, more mature. Looking back now, that feels almost embarrassing. It was the middle of winter, the kind where the days feel too short and the nights drag on forever. Most of my time was spent indoors, either watching the snow pile up outside or hiding in my room with video games to pass the time. That particular weekend felt different. My parents were leaving early Saturday morning to drive to some distant mountain town. A short trip meant to bring back memories from the early days of their marriage. I didn't care about the reason. All I cared about was the fact that I would have the house completely to myself. When I woke up, they were already gone. The first thing I did was text my best friend, Lucas. The only problem was that his parents would never let him come over if they knew there were no adults in the house. But with a little bending of the truth, he got permission to come anyway. He wasn't supposed to arrive until later in the evening, around 7 or so. Still, I was so excited that I opened the front windows, just so I could watch the street and see when he finally showed up. That was when I noticed a man standing outside. The only reason he caught my attention was because he was standing too close to the house. Not on the sidewalk, not in the street. He was past the edge of the yard, near the garage, close enough that it made my stomach tighten. He had a very specific look. Long, dark hair hanging loose against his coat. A thin, uneven beard. Tall. Too skinny. Cold air drifted in through the open window, and a shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature. I stepped back, worried he might catch me watching him. A few minutes later, I worked up the nerve to peek again. He was gone. I told myself it was nothing. Just someone passing through the neighborhood. Not worth thinking about. The rest of the day passed quietly. Snow tapped softly against the glass as I stayed in my room, killing time on my console, waiting for the evening to come. Around 7, Lucas finally arrived. We grabbed a pile of snacks from the kitchen, then hurried upstairs, shutting ourselves in my room to escape the cold. For the next 5 hours, we barely spoke about anything other than the game in front of us. By the time it was around midnight, we were still playing. Lucas left the room to use the bathroom. He was gone for maybe 20 seconds before he came back in, his voice low. "Did you hear that?" I asked him what he meant. I hadn't heard anything at all. Before he could answer, the entire house went black. The TV shuts off. The console died. The lights vanished. Everything dropped into silence and darkness so complete, I couldn't even see him standing in the doorway a few feet away. I dropped to the floor, running my hands along the carpet until I found my phone. I turned on the flashlight, the beam cutting a thin path through the dark. We stood there quietly, both of us trying to understand what had just happened. I strained my ears, listening for whatever sound Lucas had noticed before the power went out. After a moment, I asked him again what he had heard. He hesitated, then said it might have been a dull thump, or maybe footsteps on the floor below us. With the blackout, we assumed it had something to do with the power failing. Still, being young and alone in the house, with winter pressing in from all sides, It felt deeply unsettling. We knew we had to check what was wrong. We stepped into the hallway and slowly made our way downstairs. As soon as we left my room, I noticed the sound of wind outside, whistling along the walls and rattling somewhere near the roof. It wasn't especially strong, but just enough that we wondered if it might have caused the outage. Maybe we were just looking for something simple to blame. Neither of us really knew what to do. I knew there was an electrical panel somewhere in the basement that controlled the power, but I had never touched it before, and the idea of messing with it made me nervous. Lucas said he might be able to figure it out, so I led him down to the basement. The door was already open. That struck me as strange. No one ever went down there. The basement was unfinished, filled with storage boxes and old junk that hadn't been touched in years. And yet, the door stood open, waiting for us. However, with my parents having left for their trip that morning, I tried to convince myself they might have gone down there to grab a suitcase or some old bags. The basement door was towards the back of the house, and I hadn't gone anywhere near it all day. Still, seeing it open made the situation feel even more wrong. We kept our phone flashlights on as Lucas led the way down the narrow wooden steps. Each stair groaned under our weight. The basement wasn't very large. It was more like a long, wide corridor, concrete walls on both sides, with boxes and loose clutter stacked unevenly along the edges. It was completely dark. Anything outside the thin cones of our flashlights might as well not have existed. We reached the electrical panel. The metal cover was already half open. Lucas studied it for a moment, but I could tell he was just as uneasy as I was now that we were actually down there. Among all the switches, only one large breaker was flipped in the opposite direction. We didn't know what it meant. After a few seconds of hesitation, he reached out and pushed it back into place. Instantly, faint beeping sounds echoed from upstairs. Somewhere above us, appliances began to hum back to life. The basement itself remained dark. We had never even tried the light switch. The only illumination came from a thin strip of pale light spilling down the staircase from the first floor. We turned and started back toward the stairs. We had only taken a few steps when a soft shuffling sound came from the far end of the basement. Both of us froze. I raised my phone and aimed the beam into the darkness. Someone was standing there. I could see the outline of a tall, thin figure just beyond a stack of boxes. Long, dark hair, narrow shoulders. His face was hidden in shadow, and I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or if he even realized we could see him. For a split second, none of us moved. Then I turned and ran. I sprinted up the stairs as fast as I could, Lucas right behind me. I slammed the basement door shut, and we bolted straight for the front door without looking back. We ran out into the freezing night, breath burning in our chests. Across the street, I called the police with shaking hands. Standing there, surrounded by houses with their lights still on, it became terrifyingly obvious what had happened. The man in our basement had turned off the power himself. While I was still on the phone, the operator asking questions, we saw a shadow move past one of the downstairs windows. Then, about 30 seconds later, a figure passed by an upstairs window. I'm almost certain it was the window to my parents' bedroom. After that, nothing. For a few long minutes, the house went completely still. When the police arrived, they searched every room. No one was there. He had already escaped through one of the back windows. My parents were called. There were endless questions, reports, explanations. In the end, nothing ever came of it. Even now, there are too many terrifying things to think about. How long had he been watching the house? Had he been watching my family before that night? What was he planning to do by breaking in, cutting the power, and hiding in the basement? I'll never know. All I know is that my parents moved us out of that house not long after. And I still hope to this day that I never see that man again.